My name is Jessica, and I am going to give you guys some culture tips today. So today's video is going to be all about the school and how things work at school. So to give you guys a little bit of background on me, I live in rural China. I've taught in schools in big cities like Shanghai, and I've attended university in two different cities, one in a big city out on the East Coast where Beijing and Shanghai is, the other one in the province I live in now, which is in southwest China. It's called Yunnan province. Right now I live in Yunnan province in a really beautiful remote area near a pretty touristy town called Dali. I encourage you to all come to visit me. But I've had experience both in the big cities and in the more rural areas. So I'll kind of mention at different points, well, in rural areas it's like this, but cities it's more like this, because there can be some pretty big cultural differences in China. So I'll have other videos too. I'm planning 3 other ones right now. One to talk about family life and how things work with students in the family. Another one to talk about class tips, things that are taboo to do in the class, or things that you can do to improve the class based on how the Chinese thought system and education system works. And another one on my daily life. So I got some questions about things like how internet censorship affects me, or what the pollution is like, or transportation. So that'll kind of address what my daily life is like, as well as our students' daily lives. So sorry, I got distracted. I have my notebook here. Let me get started by talking a little bit about why there's so much pressure in Chinese schools. To put it simply, it's the college entrance examination. So kids in China have a test called the Gaokao. 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 It's their Chinese entrance, or their college entrance examinations. So these examinations, you know how kids in America say, if I don't do well on this test, it's the end of the world. This is kind of actually that test come to life. So if you don't do well on this test, you don't get into a good college. And China's really, really paper driven. So it's all about your diploma, where you graduated from. No one cares what you studied. They care about where you graduated from when you're getting a job, and that's like their number one thing they're looking for, you know. So that's why studying abroad is such a big deal in America, because American universities are looked at as kind of better. So even like worse American universities are better than some of the pretty good Chinese universities. Of course, the top schools like in Beijing, those are a little bit better, but a Harvard is always preferred to kind of a mid-level school here, or even some of the higher level schools here. But this examination, to do well, you need to go to a really good high school. Okay, well, if I need to go to a really good high school and I have to test into a good high school because, of course, all the good ones have tests, well, then I need to get into a really good middle school. Well, now good middle schools are getting really good competitive, so they've added tests. Well, if I have to get into a really good middle school, then I'm going to need to get into a really good elementary school. So now elementary schools have added competitive tests to get in for the best schools, you know. And I was actually at an international school teaching there when they were doing their entrance exams. And they did things like speaking examinations to test English level. I'm sure they did written examinations, even though I didn't hear about it. But they also did things like team building exercises and creative thinking exercises. So some of the schools really, they're not just looking at your English language. You do need it, or your, you know, academic ability. You need that, but there are other components that they're testing. In general, though, it is a by-the-books test. They want to know what you can do, what you can't do, and how you are academically. This is why there's so much homework. They definitely do a flipped classroom like we do for VIP Kid, where you are expected to learn the material and practice in class. That way you're really understanding the material, you're doing much better on your standardized tests that you're getting all the time. And because it's such a test-driven culture, that's why they spend longer hours at school. It's why they have more homework, and it's why they're being pushed from a really young age to do well. About their daily schedule, I mentioned they stay longer at school. That's only true sometimes. So in the cities, it's my understanding that children often go to school kind of comparable hours to what we would do in the States, but they go to other classes afterwards. So things like VIP Kid or other kinds of cram schools or piano lessons. You know, they do other things after school that are kind of more academic in nature. In my area, in rural China, kids go to school at about the same time, but they get out of school, especially elementary school kids. They get out of school like 3 or 4 o'clock. That's a little later than I got out of school, but they also have an hour to 2-hour lunch break in the middle of the day. And kindergarten, like America, only goes to school half day. But they have this really long lunch break in the middle of the day because they go home to eat. In cities, I'm not sure if they do that or not. The high school I taught in had a cafeteria, and my guess would be that city kids live kind of further out, so taking the subway 45 minutes to get home and then 45 minutes back, it's not as practical. So they're more likely to eat at school. In my area of China, I also don't notice extra classes being as prominent. Instead, middle school, high school students just stay later at school and do study halls and additional classes at the school. One thing I wanted to talk about, because everyone's talking about it, is the scarves. So the red scarves and the green scarves, and what do they mean? So the answer is they mean a lot, depending on where you go. So I'll start with the most depressing one. Everywhere, red scarves are good things. In big cities, particularly Beijing and Shanghai, green scarves are indeed used to show underperforming students. And this is pretty frowned upon, actually. All the articles I read on social media talked about how terrible this was and how they didn't understand how a school could possibly think that this is a good idea of how to treat your kids. And we even saw a picture of a pretty prominent news anchor wearing a green tie to say, like, listen, green's not a bad color, don't do this to these kids, you know, that kind of stuff. So I will say it does happen, but I wouldn't say that it's a particularly supported measure by the public. And it only happens in big cities. Where I live, it doesn't happen at all, ever. Since this green scarf thing came up on Facebook, I've been paying really close attention to the students I see around. I haven't seen one green scarf. They are all red all the time, and every student has them. So in big cities, red scarves are used to show overachieving students or students that are doing especially well. Green scarves show underachieving. In rural schools, like where I live, they are just used as part of the uniform. So maybe younger kids will have the green scarf as part of their uniform, especially kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Older kids will have it just as their uniform for a red scarf. Some of the young kids I see in the areas have red scarves too. The reason I bring up not all green scarves, hashtag not all green scarves, is because I don't want you to assume when you see a student that they're being punished. They might be, maybe they are, maybe they're an underachieving student, but maybe they're just a student that's their school uniform. So don't jump to conclusions about what that green scarf means for your class. Next, I'll talk a little bit about expectations for teachers in China. So one of the questions I got was the differences between classes in America and China and what they expect from teachers in China. And to be honest, I don't totally know, because what people expect from a local teacher and what they expect from me as a foreigner are totally different. When I come into the classroom, they want the authentic American experience. They don't want me to teach like a Chinese teacher. They want me to teach like an American teacher. So they don't give me those pressures, so I don't really know what they're expecting. When I asked my husband about this, he told me that when you apply for the job, the first thing they look at is where you graduated from. And remember, that Gaokao that I told you guys about determines where you go to university. So universities, I mean, they have a standard number set of you have to get between here and here to attend our university. And if you don't meet, having a really good entrance exam or entrance essay isn't going to fix it. So if you don't do well on that Gaokao, you don't go to a good university, you don't teach at a good school. So when you're getting employed, that's the number one thing they look at, unless you have some particularly just amazing experience, like I taught in America for a year, you know, or something like that. If you have something like that, then they will look at it. But the number one thing is where you graduated from. For classroom expectations, especially for younger kids, I think they're looking for pretty similar things. The parents, they look for pretty similar things that we look for in America. They want people who are gentle, who are friendly, who will help their kid to learn and is knowledgeable, but will encourage their kid and inspire them. The older you get, the less feely I think they get about the teacher. It's less, I want you to like be cute and friendly and fun, and more about, I want my kid to be doing well on these tests, so I want you to be efficient and good. And it doesn't mean they want mean, strict teachers. They want teachers that will encourage their students to study. They want teachers who are going to present the material in effective ways. But I would kind of say that the expectations are really similar to what we want from our parents in America. But with younger students, it's especially important that you're encouraging their kid to want to study. Because that's a big concern for parents, is that their kids don't want to study. So for younger kids, if you're looking to kind of modify your classes, I would say try to make them, I know it's hard, but try to make them want to study. That's what parents are going to respect the most about you. For differences in the Chinese classroom and the American classroom, a lot of it, again, is all test-driven. So the reason China is so test-driven and the Gaokao and the this and that is because there's so many people and there's so many students that to them it's the only fair way to evaluate students and to compare students, because they can't possibly compare essays for each of China's students. They just can't do it. They don't have the systems in place, and they just think it's not fair. It's a numbers game. And if you have the numbers, then you have them, and if you don't, you don't. And it's really easy to say the system is fair because if you work hard and you study hard, you do well. But just like in America where the systems are fair, sometimes there's injustices that aren't really appropriately addressed. For example, in my area, in rural China, there are a lot of situations where the schools kids are attending, they don't have the really good teachers, or they don't have the really good funding. And as a result, the child's education suffers. And it doesn't mean those teachers don't want that kid to learn. But if you have less knowledgeable teachers, you have less educated students. So it's a really unfair system. Obviously, those children who only have one high school, that they can even choose from, and maybe it's not a particularly good one, they're not going to do as well in the Gaokao, even if they really work hard, because they don't have the resources. So there can be some kind of discrepancies in how fair the system is, but it's theoretically fair. You work hard, you study hard, you do well, you succeed. So the classrooms, as a result, are really number-driven. These are the numbers we're getting, these are the numbers we're receiving, and they report those numbers, and that school is judged by those numbers. That creates a really big contrast to what we have in America, where, and maybe some of our American teachers will disagree with me, but I think even though we have more and more standardized tests, it's just not quite the same, where we have some freedom to let kids explore things in the way they want to explore. instead of just purely in an academic way, which is really how a lot of Chinese schools do it. It's getting progressively better. One of the schools I volunteered at in Nanjing, China, to teach English with, it was an elementary school, and they had like their, I forget what they called it, but it was like period 8, so their extra period you could add on to the day, where some kids could go home if they didn't want to stay at school, and some kids could do their music and their art classes then. So that was their opportunity to, without taking away from their academic education time, so they didn't take away from how their kids were scoring on tests, they provided an opportunity for kids to grow and learn in a creative way, where they were making art that they just came up with out of nowhere. And they were learning how to play musical instruments in a fun and creative way in a supportive environment. So those kinds of, and it wasn't an international school, it was a local school. Those kinds of things are getting more and more popular. But I would not say that they are characteristic of Chinese education yet. They're progressively getting better. Cities are obviously getting there before rural areas, because that's how progress works. But they're not quite there yet. Programs like VIP Kid are really revolutionizing how people think about education. And I don't know if it hits you guys how revolutionary our company is in China. There are other companies that teach online. I've worked for some of them in China before, but they're just not like us. They're very, I would show up for my lesson, I spoke in English. If the kid got it, the kid got it. If he didn't, he didn't. And it wasn't that I didn't care about them, but there was no focus to the lessons. The kid chose a lesson at random from like a big list, and there was no progress reports. There was no your kid's improving on this, that. It was just insane. I was a chatting partner for these students, which is one way of education. And a lot of times, to be honest, I did just abandon the lesson to chat with them, because it was more effective for them than what the lesson plan that I got. So our company, the way that they're doing things, especially for the younger children, class can be fun, learning can be fun, and for the older children, look, we can learn about animals in a cool way, in an interesting way, where you get rewarded. Those kinds of things are really revolutionary for China. And I strongly feel that VIP Kid will change the in-school education system. I'm a big believer in that. Maybe I'm a huge optimist, but I think it's true. The way that American classrooms are set up to provide a holistic education, I feel like when I was in elementary school and middle school and high school, there were aims to educate me as a human being on how to be a good human being. And that is not quite as prominent in Chinese schools. It's very academic, it's very learning based. And there's a good way to learn things, and that's it. It's a lot of rote memorization. There's not more than one way to learn. It's you learn this way or you're not studying hard enough. And that goes for learning disabilities as well. They're not quite as addressed. For things like the autism spectrum, I want to be honest with you guys, I have no idea how it's treated in Chinese education systems. For things like dyslexia and ADHD, it's just you're not studying hard enough, you need to work harder. So the way that it's thought about is it's different. Mental illnesses aren't addressed in the same way. They haven't progressed, I think, as much in China yet to address and think about those. So the way they're treated in school is just kind of non-existent. That really affects the classroom policy too, that it's just no matter what your thing is, no matter how you learn, this is how I'm teaching. It is memorization, and you have to do it. That being said, it sounds really scary and mean. I have so many students on VIP Kid or outside of VIP Kid who tell me about these teachers that are just awesome and amazing, and they're encouraging their kids and they're teaching in a fun way. So it's not like every class is learn A, B, C, D, E, but you can't mention every class when you're talking about big cultural generalizations. So let me check my list. I got Gaokao, I got extra homework, got Chinese schools, green scarves. All right. That's about it for this video. It's already been 20 minutes, so I'm sure that's enough. But let me know if you guys have any additional questions. I'll be doing some Facebook live chats too, where you guys can kind of ask questions in real time. And like I said, I've got 3 more videos coming. I apologize for my looks today. This is my day off, and we were out all day running around in the rain, and it is midnight now. So I'm gonna get to bed because I've got classes in the morning. But I hope that this wasn't too distracting and you guys could really focus on some of the culture points that I mentioned, and I hope that they help you and start to open some dialogue with you guys, whether it's experiences you've had that contradict what I'm saying, or experiences you've had that are like, hey, yeah, that totally makes sense. I welcome all contrasting or supporting experiences. I'm not a especially proud person where I'll feel hurt if you disagree with me. I'm an academic and I love debate and discussion, so please feel free to comment anything that you feel might be appropriate or pertinent, to open a dialogue and so people can talk about it, because that's how we learn. So I'm happy I can make these videos for you guys. Please feel free to include more questions you'd like to see answered in future videos or clarifications I can provide. Hope it was helpful. Goodbye!